All right, everyone, thank you again for coming. This is Mr. Zawacki, and today what we're going to be talking about is photosynthesis and cellular respiration, two processes that are actually opposites to each other, and we'll explain that throughout today. All right, so first of all, we need to know about obtaining energy, because this is the big difference between photosynthesis and cellular respiration. This all here, this top part is all about plants and how with photosynthesis. Plants are autotrophs. These are organisms that get energy, which is glucose, from sunlight. These are all your plants, your algae, shrubs, grasses, flowers. These are all autotrophs. And what they do is they do a very simple, it's actually pretty complex, but they do a pretty basic reaction. And they take in carbon dioxide, which is this. They also take in water. And they also take in sunlight. So those are the three things that plants or autotrophs take in. And the two things that they make are glucose and oxygen. That's all photosynthesis is, guys. Autotrophs do photosynthesis for this all to happen. That is photosynthesis. That's when plants take in carbon dioxide, water, and energy, and they're able to make glucose and oxygen. Now, the other half of it is heterotrophs. Heterotrophs are organisms that get energy from eating food. An example of that is animals. That's us. So autotrophs are the ones that do photosynthesis. Heterotrophs are the ones that do cellular respiration. That's the other half of it. So I want you to look at the picture on the bottom. Is that picture detailing photosynthesis or cellular respiration? Be careful with the arrows. Is that picture looking at photosynthesis or cellular respiration? Great work. Yeah, it's definitely photosynthesis. I know it's already said there on the leaf, but the thing I wanted you to look at, sunlight goes in, carbon dioxide goes in, water goes in. Remember, if those three things go in, you got glucose and oxygen going out. So those are that's really what photosynthesis is all about. Carbon dioxide, water, sunlight going in, glucose, oxygen out. So let's break up the word photosynthesis. Photo and synthesis. Photo means light. So photo and light. And synthesis means putting together. So when you think of the word photosynthesis, it's you're building something with light, putting together with light. That's the word photosynthesis. And great job, Hunter. Yeah, they are two opposite processes, but they require each other to work. And that's the whole point of today. So this is what I want you guys to make sense of why they are opposites. Okay? So this explains photosynthesis. Remember, they use sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to make glucose and oxygen. I've already said that about 6 times today. So that's something you absolutely want to memorize. The 3 things that go in, carbon dioxide, water, energy, 2 things that come out, glucose, oxygen. And then once that happens, the plants will use the glucose as food. So that's how plants get food. They get water and food just like we do. But they make their own food. That's why they're called autotrophs. We don't make our own food. The autotrophs do. They make glucose. Heterotrophs, we are consumers of it. So we'll eat plants, we'll eat animals, and that's how we'll get our glucose, by eating those things, by being a consumer or heterotroph. So why is photosynthesis important? Well, first of all, just like when we learned about early Earth, photosynthesis can also make organic molecules out of inorganic molecules. It can make glucose from carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide has no life value to it whatsoever. It's just a gas. But photosynthesis can take that carbon in carbon dioxide and they can turn it into glucose, which is sugar or food, beginning carbohydrate of life. So it all begins, it begins all food chains and food webs. All life is supported by photosynthesis. If photosynthesis did not exist, or if plants stopped doing photosynthesis, every single living thing on Earth would die, pretty much. You gotta have plants and photosynthesis to start all food chains and food webs. It also makes oxygen gas. So, you know, we need to breathe oxygen in order to live. So thank the plants and thank the algae in our oceans for creating that oxygen that we can breathe and stay alive. If they decided to just stop making oxygen, all animals would die for lack of oxygen. So that's why photosynthesis is very important. It can make organic molecules out of inorganic. It's the beginning of all the food chains and food webs, so it's the start of it, and it makes oxygen gas for us to breathe. So got to be a big fan of photosynthesis, for sure. All right, so here's just another example. Remember how I said it's the basis of all food webs? Look, here's the tree, which is the basis of this entire food web, also these grasses. All the other animals, either directly or indirectly, rely on that grass and that tree in order to survive, to stay alive. Same thing here. Yep. And the good thing about food webs, you'll learn that in Module 4, arrows always point to what gets the energy. Take a look. Like the deer is eating the leaves from the tree, so the arrow points to the deer. So be careful with that the arrow always points to what gets the energy, who does the eating. That's what the arrows point to. And the sun is the source of energy for most living things. So this is the beginning. But on Earth, this is the beginning. Plants, such as grass, use energy from the sun to make their own food. And then the zebra obtains energy by eating the grass. So now the zebra can live because of the grass. And now the lion can live because of the zebra. So we saw that in Lion King. But anyways, in the beginning of all food chains or food webs, the point of this slide is to show you that grass and trees and shrubs and all your autotrophs, they're the beginning of the food web. And photosynthesis has to take place in order for the other animals to live. Yep, good job. All right, so breaking down photosynthesis. All right, sorry about that. I got disconnected. Does anybody know the name of the organelle that does photosynthesis? And I did not go over this yet, so if you don't know it, it's okay. I'm going to see what you guys guess. Danielle had a guess. Emma had a guess. All right, good job. So that's something also you need to memorize. First of all, it's done by plants. Second of all, the chloroplast is the organelle that does photosynthesis. And the third step, yeah, you got to memorize this equation. Carbon dioxide, water, plus energy will give you glucose and oxygen. The fourth and final thing to memorize for photosynthesis are these two steps. Because photosynthesis is done in two steps. Light dependent, which means it needs light, and then the dark reaction, which means no light. So light dependent is where sunlight and water, remember two of the three things, they're absorbed and converted to chemical energy. And then they're temporarily stored in plants as ATP and NADPH, just two different molecules that we know ATP is energy, but NADPH is just another molecule used in photosynthesis. And then finally, with the dark reaction, we have carbon dioxide, and then remember ATP and NADPH from right here? So you got carbon dioxide, ATP, NADPH, they will make the organic compound, which is glucose. And that are the two steps of photosynthesis. Light dependent, where sunlight and water make ATP and NADPH, and also light independent, or dark reaction, or the Calvin cycle, where carbon dioxide, ATP, and NADPH make the organic compounds. And then Emma, great question. Think of it like step 1 and step 2 of photosynthesis. Step 1 usually happens first, because you got to have ATP and NADPH, and then those will be carried on to step 2, where those two and carbon dioxide help make glucose. No worries. I had a little bit of an issue too, but I think we're all back now. But if you get logged off, just log back on. We'll be okay. So anyways, that's what you need to memorize, guys. Done by only plants. Done in the chloroplast of the plant. Know the reaction, that the three things, carbon dioxide, water, and energy go in. Glucose and oxygen are the two things that go out. And then finally, know the two steps, light dependent and light independent reactions. Remember how I said it's done by the chloroplast? So during the light reaction, the plant's chloroplast absorbs the light. This is what a chloroplast looks like. If they ask you anything in terms of the structure, just know stroma is the space, granum is like the stack of coins, and then the thylakoid is the like connector between the two. But I don't know they'll get into that much in depth with it. I know AP Bio they do, but just make sure you know at least a couple parts of the chloroplast. And then finally, one more. This is not anything new. This is just rewording what we've already learned. Remember, photosynthesis is putting together with light. So we have carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight. 1, 2, and 3. Those three reactants will make glucose and oxygen, number 1 and number 2. Here's what carbon dioxide looks like as a molecule. We know water is H2O. Energy is energy. Glucose is C6H12O6. Not hard to memorize, but that's what glucose is, C6H12O6. And then oxygen is just O2. And here it is one more time. Carbon dioxide, water, and energy will help create glucose and oxygen. That's all we need to know about photosynthesis, guys. So know that it's done by plants, know that it's done in the chloroplast, know this equation that I showed you 3 different times on this page, and then know the steps, step 1 and step 2, which are the light-dependent and light-independent reactions. And here's an example of an Elodea plant. Actually looking in these, this is pretty cool. This is a cell. This is an Elodea plant cell. And you can see it has 2 membranes, the cell wall and the cell membrane. And inside the cell, you see many different chloroplasts. And these are the things right here that will do photosynthesis for that Elodea plant. So if I were to zoom out, so this is really zoomed in, if I were to zoom out a little bit, I would see this. And these bubbles that are coming off of it are actually oxygen. Remember how oxygen and glucose is made? So if you put a plant underwater, you should actually see bubbles come off of it. because the plant creates oxygen around it. So pretty cool picture. All right, so one more has to go. This is cellular respiration. And cellular respiration, guys, look, right here. It's the exact opposite of photosynthesis. Remember how I kept saying 1,000 times that carbon dioxide, water, and energy are needed for photosynthesis? Well, these are the three things that are made during cellular respiration. Yeah, exactly, Danielle. It's the photosynthesis equation in reverse. Good news then, if you memorize one of the equations, all you have to do is flip it backwards for the other one. Glucose and oxygen are the two things that are needed. They're not made during cellular respiration, but they're needed to get started. Yep. And then in cellular respiration, cells use oxygen to break down glucose, remember, oxygen and glucose, to make carbon dioxide, water, and ATP, adenosine triphosphate, energy. We already went over what ATP is. Remember, that's just units of energy that our body uses. And it's done by actually both plants and animals. So once a plant has done photosynthesis, if necessary, it can break down the oxygen and glucose to make more energy for itself. So plants are pretty crazy. They can do both photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Us, as animals, we can only do cellular respiration. It's critical for the survival of most organisms because the energy in glucose cannot be used until the cells store it as ATP. So when we eat glucose, when you eat something with sugar in it, you don't have immediate energy. Your body needs to break it down to create ATP energy. So that's why it's important. If we didn't have cellular respiration, we wouldn't be able to live. And cells use ATP energy to power virtually all of the activities, to grow, divide, replace worn out cell parts, execute many other tasks. So main thing here so far, that equation, this is important. That's something you need to know. It's the exact opposite of photosynthesis. So all you got to do is memorize one and just flip the other one backwards. We know that cellular respiration creates ATP energy. And that's important because that helps us live. It powers everything we need to do to live. It provides the energy required for an amoeba to glide toward food, for the Venus flytrap to capture its prey, or a ballet dancer to execute leaps. So we know ATP is important. ATP is used to sit up. It's used to eat food. ATP is used to stand up, and it's used for everything. And cellular respiration occurs within a cell constantly. Every time you breathe in oxygen, cellular respiration is happening in your body, day and night. And if it ceases, though, the cell and the whole organism will die. That's why you always got to keep breathing in oxygen. And you should always have a reserve of glucose. And once you have oxygen and glucose, you're going to have energy for your body. So here it is. Somebody mentioned that it was like a loop. You're right. Here it is right here. Cellular respiration is what happens to the food supply made by photosynthesis. That's pretty impressive. Whatever photosynthesis makes, that's what cellular respiration uses. And also, this is a very important thing. It happens in the mitochondria of cells. Remember how we were saying photosynthesis is the chloroplast? Well, cellular respiration is the mitochondria. And here's photosynthesis, remember? Carbon dioxide, water, and energy will create glucose and oxygen. Well, those two same things, glucose and oxygen, go in to create carbon dioxide, water, and energy on the way back out. So that's why it's like a loop. what photosynthesis makes is what cellular respiration needs. What cellular respiration makes is what photosynthesis can use also for itself. So that's kind of what I want you to see. They're opposites of one another, but they also rely on each other to work. So you got to have both in this world. Yep, and then the mitochondria is the powerhouse. The reason why they call the mitochondria the powerhouse is because it gives us power. It helps give us energy, ATP, in order to live. That's why it's called the mitochondria, or the powerhouse. Here it is again. Remember how I said photosynthesis is done in 2 steps, light dependent and light independent? Well, cellular respiration is done in 3 steps. Glycolysis, and this happens in the cytoplasm. You also have the citric acid cycle. Sometimes they call it the Krebs cycle. That's the second one. And then the electron transport chain. So we got the electron transport chain, the citric acid cycle or the Krebs cycle, and then glycolysis. And it happens step 1, step 2, step 3. And what you need to know here, this is probably the trickiest part to learn. It's not too bad. First of all, cellular respiration has the 3 steps: glycolysis, Krebs cycle, electron transport chain. Second, glycolysis happens in the cytoplasm. The other 2 happen in the mitochondria. And then finally, just know a little bit about what happens. Remember how glucose and oxygen go in? Well, glycolysis is the first step. Glucose gets broken down to pyruvate. And then pyruvate goes into the mitochondria, where it works with the Krebs cycle and then also with the electron transport chain. Glycolysis produces a whopping total of 2 ATP. The Krebs cycle also produces 2 ATP. But the electron transport chain produces 34 ATP. So let's all do the math. For every cycle of cellular respiration, total cycle, how many ATP do you get? So the question again was, for every full cycle of cellular respiration, how much ATP units total do you get? Good job. Very simple. Just add the 3 numbers, 34 plus 2 plus 2. There's 38 ATP units for every single time cellular respiration occurs, for every single unit of oxygen and glucose. Now, this one is the only one that happens without oxygen. These 2, so you get 36 out of the 38 ATP by having oxygen included in the mitochondria. But if you ever heard of the term fermentation without oxygen, or if you ever heard of lactic acid fermentation of working out with muscles, this only produces 2 ATP without oxygen. So this is aerobic, which means it needs oxygen. So aerobic gives you 36 ATP. Anaerobic is the other one. Anaerobic. And anaerobic without oxygen can only give you 2 ATP. That's how important oxygen is. It gives you the majority of cellular respiration ATP. All right. And then what's needed for cellular respiration? This is pretty much just a review. Remember, we need glucose and oxygen. The glucose used in cellular respiration enters cells in a variety of ways. Either plants, algae, or certain bacteria make their own glucose through photosynthesis. And then animals will eat that. And they will absorb glucose as they break down the plants and animals. Kind of already said that, but that just goes on to explain that this happens different ways. But cellular respiration can start in plants or animals. Plants already have glucose and oxygen from photosynthesis. Animals get their glucose by just eating other plants and animals. Regardless of how they get the glucose and oxygen, the cells have to have a steady supply of glucose so that ATP is continuous, which it is as long as you're healthy. And cellular respiration sometimes is referred to aerobic respiration. At least the final two steps is aerobic respiration. And remember, it transfers about 40% of the energy of glucose to ATP, and it makes 38 ATP. So our body is pretty efficient. Like out of 100% of the glucose, it uses about 40% of it. So that's pretty good. And remember, we know it makes 38 ATP per glucose. So remember that number 38. The rest of the energy from glucose is released as heat, which warm-blooded animals use to maintain body temperature. Cold-blooded animals release the heat to the atmosphere, so they're not efficient at all. Cellular respiration is also efficient compared to other conversion processes. When you burn gasoline to create energy, that's only 25% efficiency, and then 75% is released as heat. So our bodies are better at making energy than burning fossil fuels. That should be common sense, but just to give you a little note there, our bodies, even though we only use 40% of the glucose efficiently, we still do a pretty good job compared to what we can try to do with machines. So that's pretty much it, guys. The main things with today: know the difference between photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Know that photosynthesis is done by the chloroplast. Cellular respiration is done by the mitochondria, also the cytoplasm. And then know those reactions that take place. Remember? This one and this one, and how they are opposites to each other. And then finally, you should know that photosynthesis is done in two steps: light-dependent and light-independent, or the dark reaction. Know what happens there. And then finally, cellular respiration is done in 3 steps: glycolysis, which is anaerobic, no oxygen, 2 ATP, and Krebs cycle electron transport chain, which is aerobic, giving you 36 of the 38 ATP. And that's it. So does anybody have any questions? And don't leave yet, because some of you guys got your 6th live lesson attendance as well. But please let me know if anybody has any questions first. Okay. So unless there's a question, I'll answer that. But I wanted to explain, since we're all still here, the live lesson thing. If you've attended 6 already, which several of you already have, all you have to do to get the collaboration credit is to go to the segment 1 collaboration assignment. I think it's the last assignment on your assessment list. And in the student comments area, you just have to explain the 6 days that you attended and what you, at least summarize what you learned in a couple sentences on those 6 days. And that's it. If you can explain that in the 6 days and what you learned on those 6 days, you got it. And then you can go ahead and submit it, and then I'll count that as the collaboration credit. So thank you guys again for coming. I will pause the recording now.